Somewhere above the Earth, a voice was dying. In 1961, radio operators in Italy caught it on tape, gasping, calling out coordinates, then silence. According to that recording, a woman burned alive in orbit. According to the Soviet Union, she never existed. Officially, no one had even left the ground yet, because officially, the first human being to reach space was still weeks away. His name was Yuri Gagarin, April 12, 1961. That date isn't in dispute, not by historians, not by declassified Soviet archives, not by anyone who's actually done the research. And yet, 6 decades later, people still insist Gagarin wasn't first, that cosmonauts died in secret before him, erased from history to protect the myth of Soviet perfection. It's one of the most persistent legends of the space race, and almost none of it is true. It's called the Lost Cosmonauts, and it wasn't born at the edge of space. It was born at the collision of two things: total Soviet secrecy and a Western press hungry for a story that fit the Cold War narrative. Moscow wouldn't confirm or deny anything, so every rumor filled the silence. Start with the dummies. Before Gagarin ever climbed into a capsule, the Soviets tested the hardware first: pressure suits, sensors, everything a human body would need, mounted on an anthropomorphic dummy. Engineers nicknamed him Ivan Ivanovich. To make the radio tests realistic, they didn't send silence into orbit. They broadcast recordings, a choir singing, someone reading out a recipe for borscht, just enough human sound to test the signal. But radio hobbyists across Europe didn't know that. They heard voices, coordinates, and when the capsules landed and technicians pulled out motionless suited bodies, because that's exactly what a dummy in a pressure suit looks like, the rumor wrote itself. The Soviets were launching men, and some of them weren't coming back. That rumor got a scientific-sounding boost from two brothers in Turin, Achille and Giovanni Giudica Cordiglia. Using homemade equipment, they claimed to have captured the literal sound of a cosmonaut dying in orbit. A woman's voice, gasping as her capsule burned up on re-entry. The recording spread across the world. There's just one problem: they don't hold up. The orbital paths the brothers described don't match where their antenna could have physically picked up a signal. And the Russian on the tape isn't real Russian. It's grammatically broken, the kind of thing you get when nobody involved actually speaks the language. Then there's Vladimir Ilyushin. Days before Gagarin's flight, Western newspapers reported that the son of a famous Soviet aircraft designer had already flown to space and crash-landed as a prisoner in China. Ilyushin was real, one of the best test pilots in the Soviet Union, but he never reached orbit. What actually put him in a Chinese hospital bed was a car crash, a serious one, not a prison cell. So if none of that happened, what was the Soviet Union actually hiding? Real deaths, just not the ones people think, and not before Gagarin. 19 days before the flight that made him famous, a young cosmonaut candidate named Valentin Bondarenko died in a fire inside a ground testing chamber. A training accident on Earth. His name was erased, his face airbrushed out of the official group photo. 6 years later, in 1967, Vladimir Komarov became the first cosmonaut confirmed to have died in an actual spaceflight, when Soyuz 1's parachute failed on re-entry. And in 1971, 3 more, Dobrovolsky, Volkov, and Patsayev, died when their capsule lost pressure during descent from Soyuz 11. Real tragedies, just not secret for long, and not before Gagarin. Which brings us back to that dying voice on the Italian tape. It never happened, not the way the recording claims, not to a woman, not before April 1961. No human being crossed the edge of space before Yuri Gagarin. Not secretly, not unofficially, not once. The myth wasn't built on hidden bodies, it was built on silence. And when a government refuses to explain itself, people will always fill in the rest of the story. One of those names, Vladimir Komarov, has a story stranger and more tragic than any conspiracy theory. Because what actually happened to him on Soyuz 1 is something the Soviet Union really did try to hide. That's next.